How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Today we got a great discussion. We're going to talk about some updates with the coronavirus, but it's really not particularly about COVID today. Today we're going to talk about an attack on an officer that happened at a Florida facility. I believe it's called Sumter. And it is Sumter?
Sumter.
Right. And I want to basically discuss some stuff that are operational, but a perspective that I believe is starting to happen when inmates do foolish things. And we'll touch on that as well. And then also we are, again, going to provide you with some updates in regards to the coronavirus, just to keep things current. Now, guys, I have two guests on with me. We already met Greg Piper. Greg, you mind introducing yourself to our audience again?
Absolutely. Greg Piper, Director of Training for Guardian RFID. Been in corrections about 15 years. Started as a line officer in the beautiful state of Kansas Department of Corrections. Shout out to the Ellsworth Correctional Facility. Worked my way up through the levels there, staff sergeant, corrections counselor, finished at a captain's level position as the staff development coordinator. Before moving to Tennessee, took my family to Tennessee, where I was a deputy sheriff assigned to the corrections division for the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department for almost 3 years before moving on to Guardian, where I'm the director of training. I've been with Guardian a little over 3 years, and I've been to probably 220 jails across the country, from 4-bed facilities to 4,000 bed and everything in between, visiting with them, working with them, helping them be better professionals, learning where their areas of risk are, lightening their load, and just trying to let them know that there are people out there who care about them and trying to help them be better tomorrow than they were today.
Right, and obviously you're doing a great job at that. Shout out to Ken Dally and the Guardian crew. Guys, if you get a chance, please check out the Guardian RFID YouTube channel. I do post content to that channel as well that's exclusive to that channel, and they just support the message of correction. So I'm proud to be a part of them, and I'm proud also to have Greg with us on the show. And we also have, okay, so real quick, this is how I met Phillip Maginnis. Is that correct? Did I say it right?
Correct.
All right, man. That's from years of not working at motor vehicle. All right, so I got a chance to find out about Phil because I noticed that he had did a video about the attack on this female officer, one of our heroes, and there was just passion that was in this video, and I felt the need. Like, I was wondering if I could reach out to this guy and see if he'll get back to me, and lo and behold, I got lucky, and he did. And I said, hey, do you mind if we discuss what we have going on? You seem to be a little bit more specific with the details of what happened to this officer, because it's really not released. Not even locally. It's very, very minimal what they said. Basically, they're saying, oh, but the officer's okay. You know, it doesn't really say what the officer went through. And besides the fact that you said you were willing to come on, I think that what you could provide with that same level of passion would be very good for my audience. Plus, I would also like you to also give a shout out to your YouTube channel, just in case I have some people from here that may want to check out what your channel is about. So introduce yourself a little bit, Phil. What was your career like?
All right, my name is Phillip Maginnis, and my YouTube channel is under my name, just like that. I started with the Florida Department of Corrections in 1993. I retired as a captain in 2018. Spent my whole 25-year career at one institution. I did every post there they had, from CO, sergeant, lieutenant, captain. Worked all the confinement units, death row, close management, mental health, administrative confinement, disciplinary confinement, protective management, general population, mental health dorms, transport, pretty much every post that they had, I worked there during my career.
Well, first off, thank you for your service. Obviously, it's you've done a lot in your time, which is great, and that's why I think you'll be a good part of what we do here, because we're always looking for those that have knowledge. But the key here is the knowledge that's built from experience, which obviously you have tons of. So thank you for taking your time to come onto the channel today. Before we go to our sponsor real quick, I just want to mention that we do have some people that were taken from us, some fallen heroes from COVID. So this episode is going to be dedicated to them. We have a warden out of Louisiana, Sandy McCain. He oversaw the Raymond Labordi Correctional Center for the past 4 years, served with the DOC for almost 3 decades, died after battling COVID-19 for almost a month. And this comes out of Louisiana. We also, another hero, I believe this is the 9th. Let me just make sure it's the 9th. A New York City correctional officer has died from COVID-19. Officer Maurice Lacey Jr., 35, worked in the Queens Courthouse. It's at its adjacent jail. Correctional Officer Maurice Lacey served our department with dignity and honor for 14 years. That comes from Elias Husamadeen. I'm very connected to Rikers Island. We are very, very close. Those are my people there, and I know what they're battling right now, and our hearts, prayers, and everything go out to our people out in Rikers. They are hit very hard. I mean, that's kind of where it all started. But I just want them to know that their sacrifices aren't going in vain. There's a lot of people that are learning what they're doing and having those practices at their facilities. So even though it was tougher for them to get it going, because again, it was introduced to them, I want them to know that we're learning a lot from them, and their efforts and their sacrifices are not in vain, because it's saving the lives of the other facilities that are just getting it right now. So again, my love to Rikers, and obviously Elias Hussamadeen and all his people that are from Koba. Okay, so we're going to go to our sponsor. We come back, we'll give you a few updates, just some crazy numbers that we're seeing at these other facilities. I have one that I thought was pretty specific. And then I believe Greg Piper has one that he wants to bring up. And then we're going to go into the assault on the female officer, one of our heroes out of Florida Department of Corrections. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work in corrections, so please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor, and when we come back, we're going to discuss attack on one of our female heroes. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description.
All right, guys, and we're back. Okay, so real quick, Greg, why don't you go with yours first? Because you have your article out already. I mean, you said that you were shocked about some numbers at a facility. Was it in Minnesota or Arkansas?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of different facilities. The one I have in front of me is an article out of Minnesota, Moose Lake, Minnesota, state facility. They are predicting that 836 will be coming down with COVID in the next 48 hours. It's a 1,000-bed facility. And the problem is Moose Lake, which is a very small community up in northern Minnesota, they have a total of 102 hospital beds in the entire community and only 6 intensive care beds. So the concern is with 836 inmates becoming sick, they're not going to have room. They're not going to have anywhere to put, because they figure of that 836, 102 will need to be hospitalized, and at least 14 to 24 will have to be intubated, and they don't have the space or the beds for it. Folks, all over the country, we're hearing articles. I just talked to a friend of mine in Arkansas who said the entire population of Cummings State Prison in Arkansas went from 246 up to 600 offenders, all tested positive. The prisons and jails we held out as long as we could are now becoming hotbeds. They're now becoming the spot because the disease is spreading so fast within the walls. Once it gets in, it just bounces around the walls like a pinball machine. So, folks, don't think just because the world is starting to come down and that the restrictions are starting to be lifted. I know Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, all governors there have said they're going to begin to lift restrictions. I just read, just flashed on my news feed that the Korean Professional Baseball League will resume play on May the 5th. So yes, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's really starting to impact other jails and prisons other than yours, Tony. I know yours has been hit really hard over the last few weeks, but other places across the country are really starting to feel the push. This one out of Moose Lake and the one in Arkansas, like I mentioned, they're starting to see mass explosions. Now, it should turn pretty fast, too. It should go from 0 to 60, in a heartbeat, but it's happening. So please be aware that just because we're starting to see the downslide, we're not out of the woods yet in corrections.
Yeah, some states actually, I mean, we're not even close to setting up a date of opening up the states right now. It used to be that we were concerned about the threat going in. Now you got to be concerned about the threat coming out. That's one of the things right now that's one of our main worries. And that's just basically in the northern, side. Obviously, New York being the hot spot for us, and then I'm very close to New York City. I'm about, 10 to 15 minutes away. So, and again, I'm right near Newark Airport. So, we got hit pretty hard. But I wanted to mention something about the Ohio prison system. Now, this to me was shocking. As coronavirus spreads rapidly through the Marion Correctional Institution, making the Central Ohio prison apparently the nation's top hotspot for COVID-19, advocates for both correctional officers and inmates say the state is not doing enough to protect either. The union representing 349 officers and other employees at the Marion prison is concerned that correctional officers and others at the prison who have been sent home after testing positive for coronavirus are being forced back to work as soon as 3 days after being deemed symptomatic free. Those same employees are often working double shifts as well, and that comes from the spokesman. I just want to mention where they're at because here it goes. Through Monday, 1,950 of about 2,500 prisoners at the Marion prison have tested positive for COVID-19, along with 154 staff members, and 34 of those prisoners have been hospitalized. If you do that percentage, 1,950 to 2,500, you get about 75% of their population. And again, obviously with the staff, that's half their staff. Now, here's where we're at now. Again, one more update is the concern's going to be right now is bringing people back that tested positive, and how do you know that they're clear to come back? So the two measures are right now, it looks like Ohio's using, symptomatic, you're not symptomatic for 72 hours, then the doctor clears you. The other is you take two tests, negative, 24 hours later again, take it, negative, you're good to come back. But there's a concern here because no one knows what happens when you come back. Like, can you be exposed to it again? If you are exposed to it again, will you suffer more traumatically, or will you actually be kind of immune to it? Because there were talks on last week's discussion that you could have officers that have tested positive for COVID come back and work COVID units thinking that they're immune, but there's just not enough evidence saying that they are. So right now, and I assume our conversations are probably going to be this way in the very near future, we're actually going to probably be discussing what we need to start clearing the people that had the coronavirus and start bringing them back to know that, okay, we can bring them back now because one thing is they're okay to work. Second thing is that it's safe for us to be around them. I mean, that's the other concern. But Phil, before I get to you, I just want to go to Greg one more time. Do you think that is going to be our next dialogue, basically how we get people cleared to come back to work and what are the boundaries?
Yeah, I know Connie brought that up in one of our most recent roundtable discussions. We don't know if people are becoming immune. I know when it's with influenza and things like that, mumps, measles, once you have it, you become immune to it. That has not yet been proven with COVID-19. So we know a lot of people are getting asymptomatic, but we don't know if there's a recovery window, and we don't know if there's an immunity window. So that is going to be our biggest issue, is how long are we going to keep staff out? How long can we keep them out? We've talked in the past, of course, about is this their sick time? Is this state sick time given to them? So there are several hurdles to cross here. And the biggest one is going to be how quickly can our staff come back if they have it, and where can they work? Because are they completely virus-free?
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing where we go with that. Because I believe we pioneered that discussion last week when Russ mentioned that thought. And I'm like, you know what? It's plausible. So if you guys didn't see the episode last week, it was very interesting where Russ had said, you know what? This is probably what's going to happen. So we jumped ahead and pretty much pioneered that. And by the way, guys, for Ohio, sorry, I swallowed my water wrong. For Ohio, one officer has fallen and 1 inmate. The officer's name was John Dawson. Hey, Phillip, before we go to the attack on the our young female officer, our hero, do you have anything that you would like to say in regards to the battle against COVID?
I got a few numbers that the department has released. These are like 2 days old, though. I haven't gotten anything yesterday or today. But as of two days ago, 239 staff throughout the state had actually what they call it is security under quarantine. So 239 of those, and over 4,100 inmates statewide that have technically on quarantine. Now they have had deaths, but it's mainly been from a private institution. I want to say out west. I want to say Blackwater. I'm not sure on the number of inmate deaths, or even if the department's actually putting out the true numbers, because they've been putting off releasing the numbers for at least 3 weeks. So we don't know how true those numbers are or how current they are, because they've been stalling. Newspaper picked up that information and put it out there that they've been refusing to comply with politicians' orders to release numbers and stuff like that. So,
well, I was talking to a reporter today, and guys, if you're working out of Indiana, he was asking some good questions. He really was concerned about staff, but again, I'll give you his name just in case. But again, you never really know anything until it's finally in print. But his questions were about us, because he did assume that you don't take care of staff, you can't take care of the inmates, which obviously I agree. And his name is Jake Harper. Jake Harper, and he's been reporting on incidences that are happening in Indiana. And I like his questions, but now how he, puts his touch to it, his finesse. I would still like to see what he makes out of what I gave him. I was on the phone with him for about over an hour. But we were talking about the numbers, and he was asking, do you think the numbers are accurate nationally? And I said, you know what? I don't know what would be the purpose of people hiding the numbers. I said, one of the concerns right now is you have the media right now sensationalizing a lot of stuff, which makes us as management and frontline really having to calm down fears that may not be realistic. But one of the concerns we mentioned was that if the test is done wrong, so you could have someone that passes a respiratory failure, coincidence at this time, but tests negative, but it could be because the test was done wrong. But they'll just go with the one test and say, oh, nope, he's negative, that's good. And deep down inside, he may not be negative. So I don't know if we're ever really going to get a true count of what those numbers are. I mean, safe to say that right now, a lot of facilities, when they have these deaths, they automatically assume, especially if it's respiratory, that it's COVID related. And I believe even with the officers, a good thing about the correctional officers now recently was that, and just law enforcement in general, first responders in general, is you don't have to prove how you got COVID. They were trying to say that you had to prove that you got COVID from the job. How are you going to prove that? So now they just said if you die of COVID at this time, they're automatically going to count it as a line of duty death, and that counts for correctional officers as well. And I thought, Greg, you agree that's a great step forward for us, correct?
Absolutely. It's I don't know why it took so long for them to come up with that, but the hard part is, like you said, we don't know whether that was something that occurred while on the job or while they were going to Walmart or on the way to work. It doesn't matter. They continued to go to work. They continued to show up every day and work behind the walls, and they got COVID, whether they were on their way to work, home from work, at work, doesn't matter. They got the disease. They passed away from it. They need to be memorialized, and they need to be, their families need to be taken care of because of that sacrifice.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I'm glad to see that correction was part of that. It seems like always correction is an afterthought. So it's great to see that people are jumping on that initiative. And it really did start in New York when they started mentioning their concerns, and they were saying, hey, everybody's worried about the community, but people think that the prison is the safest place, the jail is the safest place, but it just takes one person and it's going to ignite. And it did. So Rikers is leading the way in that battle, but also emphasizing the importance of, let's not forget that we have to get resources to these prisons, to these jails, which was, to me, again, Elias Hussamadin's been on my show. He's fighting it every day. I want to say they lost 9 officers. I spoke to Tyson today. So that's 9 active officers. So I can't even imagine what they're going through. We lost, well, 1 from mine, and then another from Hudson County, and I could barely deal with those, let alone 9. It's a horrible feeling. But unless anybody else has anything to say, we can move on to the assault at Sumter. So we're good. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to forward the show over a little bit to Phil. Phil's more familiar with this, so I'll have him break it down, and then me and Greg will kind of feed off what we got. And then towards the end of this discussion, I really want to pop a perspective that I'm seeing again, which is an effort to minimize acts of aggression from the population. And I'm tired of that. Listen, I'm not anti-inmate. I'm not saying that, but I'm tired of when we minimize assaults on staff and look for a justification that in the end, it doesn't matter. Assault on staff is assault on staff no matter how you try to justify it. It's unacceptable, and those that do it should be prosecuted. They should be faced with criminal charges, but everybody's looking for excuses as to why they do these behaviors. But in the end, the behavior was still done. So what does that excuse really matter? Try to explain that to the brave hero who's fighting for their lives. You know, it's sickening. Go ahead, Phil. What do you got?
All right, there was a young female officer that was working a youthful offender dorm at Sumter Correctional. She was a COT, which is a TEA trainee, whatever you guys call them or other people call them. So she was fairly inexperienced. Had a couple of the inmates knock on the door. The officer station door asked for a request. Well, there was no tray flap or any sally port way for her to hand them the request, except for her to open the door to hand them to her. But when she opened the door, 6 other inmates rushed in, hit her in the head with a chair, knocked her down, took her handcuffs, handcuffed her, used her own chemical agents against her, tried to get her keys, and just beat her senseless. The injuries, she ended up getting multiple stitches, multiple staples, broken nose, bruises, contusions. Her eyes were swelled shut. She got sent out by EMS. They identified the inmates, ended up transferring them up from Sumter to Florida State Prison. They put them on a heightened security status, which is, you know, they house them by themselves. They can only come out for their activities and showers during daylight hours. A lieutenant or above has to be present, and they have to come out with a camera.
I wanna. Now you explained it great in detail. I want to show you this article that was released about this. Now he explained exactly what happened to that officer. So let me just have you backtrack. What were the injuries this officer had after the assault?
Black eyes, multiple bruises, broken nose, different cuts and lacerations on her face and head. Of course, chemical agent exposure. So.
Okay, so what I want to do, and I'm looking for the article now, I want to show you how quickly they brush over those injuries. That's what gets me upset. And I read multiple articles, so multiple articles are pretty much saying the same thing. I just got to get the article. I just had and I lost it. Let me just Google it real quick. Hey, real quick, while I Google this, hey Greg, any thoughts on what just happened? The story he just mentioned?
Yes. You know, when you start to describe what she was forced to do in opening the door, I don't know if you saw my face, but I immediately started to cringe because, you know, we get put in horrible situations based on the physical plant that we're forced to deal with. And that is one of the advantages I have because I do get to travel around. I do get to see facilities. I see really nice facilities, gorgeous jails, brand new jails that are great, state of the art. And I see places that are, I call them death traps because there's just accidents waiting to happen. And if there's not a tray slot, a push through door, something, a mail slot for them to be able to deliver Form 9s, as we call them, kites, paperwork, whatever it is, pencils to the offender without her having to open a secure door and be face-to-face offenders, then that's that. I mean, that's not anyone's fault other than the architects who designed the jail or the facility. And we all know I don't know if you guys have been around during facilities that are brand new facilities that are being built and had that opportunity. But most of the guys, places that I've been and I've met these jail administrators, the people who design jails don't necessarily work in jails. So it's kind of a weird dichotomy. They do a great job designing these beautiful facilities, but they're not always practical. So I think we've got the first biggest issue is obviously physical plant issues, and that has to be changed immediately.
Well, you know what you said that was actually key was we actually just discussed this with the Cook County situation. you know, I don't know why he opened the doors, but the fact is I'm hoping that there's nothing that required him to open the doors, like something put out by management that required these officers to open the door. Like we looked, the first thing when we were watching that video is we looked for the food ports. We looked for the, you know, the alternative measure. And then once you see that, I said, well, why the hell are you opening the door? Well, in this case here, I don't know if it was policy and procedure that required this young officer to open up the door, but that to me is always going to be our question. You saw, like, why are we opening that cell door, especially when we're alone on that floor? Now this, I want to get some before I get to Phil. This is what they say. Now, Phil explained the injuries. And again, just to, why not, you know, can we say the injuries one more time, Phil? Just to note them again.
Actually, I'll pull it right off of what I have. All right. She's suffered both black eyes, both of them swollen shut, a broken nose, several lacerations to her face, and a large laceration on the back of her head.
Okay, now, tell me what you think about this when I read this off. I'll start with Phil and then Greg. I'm just going to read off this paragraph. After an unspecified number of inmates attacked the officer at Sumter Correctional Institution, other prisoners intervened. This comes from Florida Department officials. The department did not name the officer who sustained non-life-threatening injuries and is in stable condition at a local hospital. So again, Phil, how does that make you feel? Because that's in every article I read. It minimizes the actual injuries because whether they're non-life, the point is, when you're getting involved in that, I'm sorry, guys, that is a life-threatening incident. You know, the incident itself is life-threatening. She's lucky that her life wasn't taken. She's lucky that those are the only injuries that she got. Why couldn't they present it in a manner that highlights the danger as opposed to saying they're just non-life-threatening injuries? What's your thoughts on that, Phil?
That's just the way it is now. That's the way the system has changed and society has changed. Now, they always try to downplay it, anything with staff, you know, staff injury, stuff like that. Now, if that would have been an inmate on the other hand, oh my goodness, they'd have landed a helicopter, he'd have been in traction on life support. They would have doctored it up to where the prison guard beat him to death, as opposed to 6 inmates, 6 YOs rushed in on a female officer and beat her. For multiple, I mean, the official report that they saw on camera was between 9 to 10 minutes. They whooped this woman. They beat her down. I don't care if you're a man, a woman, whatever. No one deserves that. And the fact that it was a woman makes it even worse. But what credit do 6 inmates get for doing that?
And you know what's funny is, and we'll get to this in a little bit, how people start to justify these acts of aggression now. It's like no matter what happens, we turn out to be the ones in the wrong. And before I give you this perspective, and well, first let me go to Greg. Greg, when you heard me say that, you know, the specific department did not name the officer who sustained non-life-threatening injuries and is in stable condition at a local hospital. How does that make you feel when you read that? And that's what every article is saying. They're not highlighting those injuries, and they're not highlighting the fact that she's lucky to be alive after being attacked for 9 minutes. All they're saying is non-life-threatening injuries.
Well, my first thought is, honestly, I'm going to take a step back, and my guess is the newspaper got that from the PIO at the facility, and the facility did not want to divulge what happened. Sounds like when you ask the coach of a professional hockey team, hey, what kind of injury is your guy got? It's lower body. You know, they don't get specific because they don't want anybody to know. They hide the injury. But in this particular case, I get it when you want to keep it close to the vest. But at the same time, by explaining what happened, being more out. I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words. Yeah, being more not so close vested about this by telling people exactly what happened. You can expose the dangers of what happens inside corrections by saying non-life threatening. Hey, you know what? If you slip and fall and bang your elbow on the ice, non-life threatening. But I'll tell you right now, you break a person's nose, that can be life-threatening. We all know that can absolutely. That means that she was beat in the face and head area. So I don't know how anybody can say non-life-threatening unless they got an MD behind their name, because any head injury is life-threatening.
I agree with you 100% because the situation itself is life-threatening. So, you know, it's not like, you know, as you said, falling and bumping your arm. This is the situation itself, being attacked by multiple inmates for 9 minutes. That's a life-threatening situation. So to sit there and minimize the fact that, okay, well, the injuries were this. Okay, even if you thought the injuries were small, she's lucky just to have those injuries. I mean, it could have been worse. So to me, it's like minimizing that. And it gets me upset. And I think the reason why that gets me upset is because every time I see stuff like this, I notice that they try to minimize the actions of the aggressive inmates by going back at us and wondering, what did you do wrong? I remember a while ago, there was a female officer that was killed in Texas. And I remember as soon as she was killed, I was at a birthday party when I was notified. Now, she was killed overnight. I didn't get the hit-ups from Texas until somewhere in the early afternoon, maybe 1 or 2. And I just started getting, my phone just started going off the hook. And my wife's like, what's going on? I said, I have no idea. So I'm checking the messengers, and I see an officer. She was killed on 3rd shift working in a kitchen area. And I was like, you know what, babe, let me go on the phone. Let me just put something out there on my channel, just let people know the dangers of the job. And they were specific with what happened because they wanted people to know this is the dangers. This is the message that has to get across. So I remember doing it, and obviously there was a lot of support back because, you know, I did exactly what was told from me, right? And I've been doing that for quite some time. Anytime there's a fallen hero, if I get a chance, I do a quick little blurb. If I don't get a chance, you have to know that on all my social media pages, I post every falling officer, fire, whatever I can get on my feed. Correctional officers, I post it. With that said, recently there was a major attack at, I won't say the state. I won't say the state because then they'll know I'm talking about them. But, and this ain't nothing negative to that state because I love this state. But what happened was a few people started sending me some pictures of these brave officers that were brutally attacked by these inmates at their facility. It was kind of like an uprising. And of course, they blamed the uprising, and we'll get to this later, on inmates dealing with the unknown because of the coronavirus. Well, you know, just a way to minimize what they've done. And I said, hey, you mind if I share these pictures? And of course, they're like, no, share it. Let the people know how dangerous the jobs are. And that's always been my routine. If you send me the pictures, I'm going to share. If I got assaulted, I've been in the business of show the pictures. I want people to know what we do because that's part of my message. I think people minimize the dangers of the job. I think even with the coronavirus, that's why people think, oh, just release inmates. Do you know the type of people that we have to deal with that could get caught up in that mix of that release? Anyway, what shocked me out of all this was after I sent the pictures out, the one guy that sent it to me, he goes, Gangi, he goes, can you do me a favor? No, actually, it wasn't him. He didn't know I had to tell him. Some lady messaged me first, and she says, can you do me a favor? And it was a little bit of a nasty message she gave me. Basically, I need you to remove those pictures. The victims, the officers that were assaulted, do not want those pictures up on the internet, not knowing that I received them. And that was just automatic, a reaction for me. I'd done it. So the way she said it kind of got me very upset. I said, listen, I apologize. I didn't mean no harm by it. I'm used to doing that because people that go through these sacrifices, they want to make sure it doesn't happen again. It's a tremendous admission of vulnerability. But you know what? We put it out there and people get a brief perspective. At that time, I had posted that picture for about 20 minutes. It was already at like 300-400 likes. I mean, it was making its ways. And a lot of support, not just from the state, but from other states. Like, oh my God, love you, brother. Hope you're okay. Very good community support and basically advice and how to make, you know, what we need to do to make this sure it doesn't happen again. So I kind of had a back and forth with this female, brought it up to the person that gave me the picture. He goes, dude, I apologize. He goes, I just found out that they don't want those pictures posted. I said, who? The department? He goes, no, the people that were assaulted. And I said, that's a shame. Have you explained to them why we do it? Have you explained to them that we do that because we want to get the message across the dangers of the job? And unfortunately, out of respect, I did have to take the pictures down, but it was shocking to me that they didn't, all three of them didn't want to share that story, but I do accept it. But stories like that have to be shared because people need to get a taste of reality. But well, let's start with Phil. What's your thoughts on that? Do you, if you were assaulted and you know the dangers of this job and you know how people try to minimize it, would you want those pictures shown?
Here's my thing on that. It's like the general public has no clue what goes on behind the gates. All right. And I'm sure y'all states and everywhere else, all they sit there and try to do is somehow downplay what correctional officers do and what correctional staff do. to avoid having to pay them their value on the job that they do. They're all underpaid, they're all overworked. So of course they're going to downplay staff injuries. They're going to up inmate stuff, but they're going to downplay officer injuries to justify having to pay them or give them the benefits or show the value of what they're really worth. So I see nothing wrong with sitting there putting it out there. I mean, as long as you can kind of keep the identity, you know, somewhat. I mean, I wouldn't put like, you know, their whole face or anything on there, but you know, it's like the stuff you see, it's like the general public doesn't know. They don't understand, you know, you walking in and you got to make rounds in a building that's got 120 inmates in there and they all have shanks that'll go right through you. They don't understand that because they don't see it. So if you actually see pictures of somebody sliced open or with something sticking out of them, or, you know, officer, you know, beat down to a pulp by, you know, lock in the sock or something like that, then yeah, they need to see that. That way they're like, man, them people really earn their money. We need to give them more. Politicians don't even see that. They choose what they want to see and they choose what they want to believe, and they sit there and sweep everything else under the rug.
Yeah, it was shocking to me because that's the first time I've had that happen in, I don't know, 5 or 6 years since I've been doing that. And for a moment I felt guilty. I was like, man, it made me question everything I've ever done prior. I mean, literally, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't be posting this. But then I'm like, but that kind of defeats the purpose of really telling people what this profession's about, the dangers we face. And unfortunately, people need to see reality. They need to see that. If they don't see that, they're not going to believe it. What's your thoughts on that, Greg?
Well, as the officers that got assaulted, I can see my initial reaction, you know, after the shock has worn off. Yeah, I can see some embarrassment. Some, you know, I just got my you-know-what handed to me, and there's a level of pride in what we do. And I can see them saying, you know, no, I don't want my face to be out there. I don't want people to know that I got my butt whooped. But like Phil put so beautifully, I think if we kept their identity secret, you know, blurred out the face, whatever, but still show the injuries, still show the situation. Every failure is a training opportunity. As a former training supervisor and what I do now as the director of training, every failure is not a failure. It's an opportunity to show how we do better next time. So every video that comes out where an officer gets assaulted, every video that comes out where an officer assaults an inmate is an opportunity for training. Every one of those is a positive step forward to increase awareness, and so we can all improve. So I'm going to have a conversation with those guys and say, yeah, I get it, you're embarrassed. Let's make sure we don't show your identity, don't show your face, but please let us use this as a tool, whether it's an assault, an escape, anything. We want to use those as tools to get better at what we do. It's how we become better professionals.
Yeah, you know, it's a good learning thing for me because I was so used to, as soon as something happened, people would rush to me and say, hey, Gange, post this up there. And I always do it blindly. You know, I trust the audience that sends me the stuff. They're usually the same individuals. So I never had that problem before. So for a moment, yes, I did feel a little guilty. But what got me upset was the initial message from the person who made it look like I'm doing this for, you know, whatever, any other reason but the fact of why I was doing it. And I understand the fact that, yes, you know, covering the face, I see that now. But I still feel that when these incidents happen, we have to let that information get out there, like you guys said, because if not, the problem is the media has a perspective that's painted out to the public. It's a perspective that minimizes the dangers that we do. And we have to fight every day just to show them that hint of danger. And I'm going to be honest with you, it doesn't come from reading an article. It comes from watching videos or seeing the aftermath of these brave heroes that have been beaten up and torn down. You know, that's reality. Yeah, Phil.
Let me add something in there, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything like that, but one of the videos that I did, a couple of them back, was to actually bring to light the dangers that every correctional officer walks in there. I did a video on nothing but contraband. I pulled out plexiglass shanks, steel shanks, the cell phones, everything that you can imagine I pulled out, put in front of the camera, and it's like, this is what we deal with, people. And it's on there. And like I say, the general public don't either know it, or they don't realize it, or they choose not to see it, politicians. So that's why I brought it right to their face. Hey, here's a 16-inch shank. Hey, here's one of plexiglass, undetectable by metal detectors. Hey, here's a cell phone. I pulled out a cell phone that was the same size as a battery that goes in a cell phone.
Small.
kind
You
of
know,
unique.
you know what's funny? I feel that sometimes people that own these stores that make up these gadgets, they do it specifically for the inmate population, you know, or for people that want to smuggle stuff in. Now, the last part of this conversation is kind of like a quick dialogue today, is I want to discuss the minimizing of responsibility from the inmate population. And to me, I first really noticed this, I mean, maybe even sooner than that, but in 2017, we lost a hero on February 1st. His name was Lieutenant Floyd, right? Sergeant Floyd at the time, but posthumously promoted to a lieutenant. And I remember when this riot had occurred, going through social media, because the riot was pretty much broadcast live, guys. And you could see the interactions from the comments. And a lot of the comments were finding a way to blame staff. Like, it's about time it happens for all the stuff that staff has done, or this facility has no programming. And it's like, wow, I can't believe you have this hostage situation where 4 staff members are taken hostage, and the public, the people from the outside, what they don't realize is that they're finding justification for the inmates who are doing something wrong, and that motivates these inmates. That actually has the chance to unite these inmates on a common cause. So it's making our chance to enter and be successful, it lessens. So the concern here is now every time I see this, I don't know if I'm biased to it now, but when I see staff assaults or staff casualty caused by an inmate, I look to see how it's worded in the paper or in the periodical, just to see if they're going to try to push some blame. And just things like, even just something where it's non-life threatening, that gets to me. That irks me. Inmates get caught with cell phones, and as much as you explain why cell phones are a danger, why it's contraband, all this other stuff, someone will turn around and say, well, you know, you just don't want people to expose the truth. That's why you don't want them having cell phones and going live on TV. You know what? That was never even a thought 5-6 years ago when cell phones were still a threat. The threat is still there, but everybody has learned to come up with an excuse and an effort to try to minimize the threat, and people believe it. Like, you know, there'll be this little audience that says, that's right, Gangi, you know, that's why you don't want cell phones. It has nothing to do with the fact that they can smuggle drugs in or that they can order hits. None of that. It's just the fact that, you know, your officers are doing corrupt shit and you don't want the inmates videotaping that. You know what? You know, either way, you can't win. So when we have this happening right now with our brave warriors getting attacked, the riot in Lansing, inmates escaping out of Yakima, South Dakota, Indiana assaults that are happening there. These inmates are acting very aggressively. And then when you go to look for something that just puts it right on that inmate, okay, or right on those group of inmates, it will say very minimal what they did, even though the picture shows something totally different. And then they'll say, and this is because of COVID, because the inmates are dealing with unknown situations. And right now, this is them acting out because of the coronavirus and not knowing if their life is going to be, you know, taken by COVID. And they're just giving out these excuses that to me are irrelevant. You're minimizing the actions of what these inmates done and the sacrifices that these heroes are making. So my concern is this, and I'll go to Greg first and Phil. In the end, when this coronavirus thing is done, corrections is going to prove to be something heroic. This is our chance to be consistent nationally, to really look at each other and what are you doing? What are we doing? How can we get better? Really to build a network that can really strengthen corrections on a national level and maybe start bringing us up to that level of law enforcement like some states, like in Jersey with law enforcement in New York. You know, we need that recognition. But it's also going to give us respect, because if people don't realize it, people should realize that the officers that are going to work, they're sacrificing themselves for the inmate population. That's what they're doing. They're going to work right now to sacrifice themselves for the inmate population. But we're not getting any thanks from anyone. We're not getting the thanks from the inmate family members. We're not getting the thanks from, you know, the politicians. And I'll be honest with you, some of the inmates may be saying thanks because they know the world. They're familiar with the sacrifice we're making. But at this moment to shine, when we have a chance to be a phoenix and rise above the ashes, it kills me to notice that when we have an officer like the other day, the young female officer that was assaulted, we should have national attention, because, again, look at the time she's working, this pandemic. That should also be noted. She's going to work during a pandemic, risking her well-being during this pandemic. You know, beef her up. Put her on the pedestal that she deserves to be on, correct? And then whatever you do, don't minimize the sacrifice you just made by saying it was non-life threatening and the inmates are acting out because of COVID. It's disgusting. Greg, what's your thoughts on that?
On what again? No, I'm kidding. Don, that was you were really you were
upset
up on
with
top
it,
of your
man.
soapbox and your pedestal, and you heard
never
him
see
preaching.
me like that, right? I just, you know what it is? This still gets to me because the problem is that part of my mission for the last 6 years is to get this recognition. It takes forever to move an inch.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that moves me so far back. It's like everything I've done the last 5 years is fruitless. We've done
Here's the issue, and I talk to classes all over the place about this issue, is that I place the blame squarely in a 50-50 category. 50% of the blame absolutely goes to the media and the public for their lack of understanding and their lack of desire to understand what happens inside the walls. We're not going to give the legislation's not going to give us enough money to get the appropriate funds, and the media doesn't care about us because, well, it's not glamorous, it's not glorious, and that's half the problem. The other half of the problem, and both of you and I being supervisors in our past know, the other half of the problem is one or two officers out there who ruin it for us. And we've got these bad officers, and they're the ones who show up on the media, and they're the ones who blow it for all of us. Dad used to say, one aw shucks can ruin 10 attaboys. So all these great things we do is ruined by that one officer. So I firmly place it in, it's a 50-50 split. But right today, the thing we're going to focus on is what can we control, and that's the officers on the inside. We have to continue to do our jobs. We need to be that phoenix that rise above the ashes. And a little bit later, if you want me to, I want to give an example of why we don't have positive role models, what it is that we're missing in corrections, and where are we going to get that from? How do we motivate our staff to move forward? But the media, absolutely, they take half the blame. They will not give us a fair shake, and I don't understand why. Maybe it's because we won't let them in our world. They can't come into our world and see it every day. They can ride along with officers. They can do those things. They can't come into our world because it just won't work. We can't have media inside the walls every day.
Well, you know what's funny is, real quick, the topic that you want to talk about, the role models, you want to save that for another show, or is that a topic is that something that you could discuss briefly now? And I want to answer your question about the media. So you want to do your thing first?
I can touch on it briefly. I always like to say that when I got into corrections, back in the early 2000s, is that I really needed a role model. Now, if you wanted to be a cop when you were growing up, you had really good role models out there. You had examples on TV and in the movies. If you want to be a firefighter, you have examples. If you want to be a doctor, you had Marcus Welby. I know that's really going back there. If you want to be a lawyer, you had good examples. Now I look at the examples that we have in corrections. We had Barney Fife, right? We have Shawshank Redemption. We have The Longest Yard. We have Cool Hand Luke. We have Prison Break. We have all these media examples and television shows where we're all just a bunch of idiots. There's truly only one decent role model in corrections.
Green Mile.
There it is. That's it. That's exactly right. And on another show, we will talk about the Green Mile, and there's a hidden meaning behind the movie The Green Mile. I'm going to save that for another show because that's like a 5-minute dialogue. But the character that Tom Hanks plays, that is what I've patterned myself after since the moment I stepped inside the walls, and that's the pattern I tell every officer. If you want to be somebody, you be Paul, Sergeant Paul, Tom Hanks' character from The Green Mile. You do that every day, you will have a much longer and healthier and more productive career.
You know what's crazy? Before we go to Phil, that book's a 500-page book. I read it in one day. I just happened to be home, and I just happened to read that. I just couldn't put it down. That's after I seen the movie. And I read that book in just one complete day. I want to touch on something before we go to Phil. Remember you said the media. You know what happens here is the media obviously is controlled by politics. We know that. Corrections, our profession, we don't lie on the extreme left or the extreme right. We're in the middle. One side wants to release all inmates. The other side wants to privatize. So we're in the middle. Nobody wants to take the sacrifice that we are in that compromise. So we are forgotten because the field of corrections, us, the brave men and women, don't fall into a political spectrum. We do the job because the job has to get done. And all we ask for at the end of the day is don't forget about us. But we're forgotten because we don't fit into anybody's agenda. But if we did fit into their agenda, people would fight for us all the time. But we're not going to get that. Hey, Phil, what's your thoughts on what we've been discussing?
To justify an assault on staff due to COVID or saying that the inmates' misbehavior is due to COVID or whatever is straight BS. Because it's just a cop-out. There's no way. Because COVID is affecting everybody nationally. Are we having national rise? Are we having general population people go to their neighbor's house and beat them up because they're scared of COVID? Do we have correctional officers strapping up their boots going in every day to the institution, beating inmates because they're scared of COVID? No, not at all. That's just a cop-out. That's an excuse, and they're trying to reward them for bad behavior. Oh, let's be sympathetic to this inmate because he may or may not have been exposed to COVID. Well, guess what? That same officer may or may not got exposed to it, but they're not whooping nobody. They're not sitting there rushing 6 deep in one inmate's cell. It's a cop-out, man. It's like I said, it's like they don't know. They don't want to know. They choose not to know. They don't want to learn what we do. They don't want to learn how it is. All they want to do is minimize everything for staff and maximize everything for the inmates, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. But, this poor inmate may be exposed to COVID. Well, guess what? That lady that's going home to her 2 kids is exposed to it too. That man that's going home to a sick wife has been exposed to it too, because he gotta put food on the table. He's got bills to pay. That's a straight cop-out excuse, and whoever asked you that should be ashamed that they even sat there and brought that up, because they know that's a BS question that deserves no answer.
Yeah, you just like you and Greg, you guys both hit home, and I'm used to this. I'm used to people minimizing those actions, so I saw it coming ahead of time, just like Russ pioneered a dialogue later on that I'm sure is going to hit home in a couple of days. You're going to see this a lot recently too, because if you look at this, even when they talked about the assault on the female officer, they were quick to go about by how the facility is plagued with COVID and, how many inmates are affected. And, it's just a way to minimize the responsibility. And I've seen that. And again, I don't know if I've created a biasness to looking for it, but I've seen it for the last couple of years. But I really saw it in the that social media with that riot that happened at Vaughn. So, I'm just jumping on it because, again, if we don't jump on it quick and neutralize it, people start believing it, and that becomes the norm. So eventually what's going to happen here is if we don't do shows like this, and hopefully people watch it, but if we don't do shows like this, people could run rampant with that. Eventually it's like, you're at a table and you're talking about a staff assault, and one of your own family members be like, well, you got to realize it's got to be crazy for those inmates who, don't really know what's happening. But how does that justify? Oh, let me go back to something before we go to a closing. There was something else I wanted to mention. So remember, I talked about the female officer, the fallen hero out of Texas. And there was another one. Oh, it's Megan Callahan. Megan Callahan, I'm actually working on doing a documentary about her story. She's one of our fallen heroes out of North Carolina, Birdie Correctional Facility. Very familiar with that story. It's a story that has to be told. Thank God Guardian RFID is putting up the funding to tell that story, and that's exactly what they're funding. There's no return of investment. This is just, I want to tell her story, and the company just being so willing to do that and invest their time, including flying me, a camera crew, interviewing the families, taking us out to eat. This project's got to be very expensive to do. High quality video, high quality people on the project, people that are passionate about the project. But I want to mention something. So when I remember finding out about Megan Callahan's death, it was in April of 2017. Now, mind you, North Carolina was hit hard that year because they had the death of Megan Callahan at Birdie. And as they were still going through some changes, Pasqua Tank was in the end of October, where they lost 4 more staff members, totaling 5 in that year. So for some reason, Megan Callahan, that story really did stuck out for me. And when Ken Dowley, when I first met him and we were talking about projects, I could have came up with anything. Didn't have to be a fallen hero. I don't even know where Megan Callahan's name came out of. It just came out. But I remember hearing about her death because, and it's funny because your emotions attached to memories. So I remember exactly where I'm at when I see all the deaths that are affected by corrections because you're emotional behind it. I was actually at my wife's grandfather's, he was in a home. And while we were having pizza with him, I started getting messages. So I go to look and I was like, oh my God, you got to hear the story about this sergeant who was killed with a fire extinguisher. She went to put out a fire. It was a trap, and the inmate wind up taking her out with the fire extinguisher, right? So here's what happened. As soon as that happened, I posted the story on all my venues, on Facebook, on Instagram, on whatever venues I have on YouTube. So few responses were, oh my God, our heart goes out to the Callahans, our heart goes out to Birdie, heart goes out to North Carolina, whatever it was. But then there were responses that were like, well, what's a female doing in a male facility? Or, well, she shouldn't have gone in there without backup. Let me ask you a question. Whether she made that mistake, which is irrelevant to me at this point, or whether she was a female working in a male facility, did any of those things warrant that inmate to beat the shit out of her until she was lifeless? No. So why is that even a question that has to come out? How about we stop doing those questions that look to minimize the hero and what the hero did? Maybe she should have waited for backup, or maybe she shouldn't have. The point is that her life was taken in a ruthless act of violence that does not need to be looked at from her. It needs to be looked at from him, from the person that did it. And at that moment there, because that was the same year, remember, February we lost Vaughn, February we lost Floyd, April was Megan Callahan, October was the four from Pasquotank. And I could name their names too, because don't forget, we also have Jeffrey Howe, the maintenance worker. A lot of people always forget he's a hero too. Anybody that works in that facility day by day is a hero to me. But that's when I started realizing, man, we have these fallen heroes, and within our community, we recognize them. We stand tall. We believe in their mission. But then you get people that look to point blame even on our fallen heroes that went to go do something correct, and you're looking for a flaw. How disgusting is that? So I think that same thing's going to happen here. We're going to get these attacks on staff because inmates could be looking for a reason to act out. And no matter how much we pose the danger, it's going to come right back at us and say, well, it's got to be that coronavirus. It's got to be that COVID that's making these inmates act crazy. It's something I'm tired of. I'm tired of it. Hold responsibility where it needs to be, because if you hold responsibility where it needs to be, then we'll get the change that matters. Because then people will see the dangers that exist instead of minimizing and trying to say it's a one-time thing. Really, it's one time. Well, just in the course of a couple of weeks, how many riots have we had? That did not end in non-life-threatening injuries. It's just upsetting. But all right, so let's go. Phil, you have any closing thoughts?
Man, I'll tell you what, I'll go back to touching a little bit on the female in there. The way they're going to say it is like, with not having the tray flaps in or the door, her having to open the door and all this kind of stuff. The typical thing they say is, well, that's the way we've always done it. And it's never a problem until it becomes a problem. Well, now it's a problem. And I made a comment to somebody today. I bet they got maintenance down there right now cutting tray flaps in them doors now. But it's unfortunate this had to happen to this young girl. And seriously, it's like she's young, a COT, doesn't have any experience. After this is done, do you really think she's going back? I mean, I hope she does, but I wouldn't bet on it. It's like that's a traumatizing experience. That's something that she'll never get out of her head, and she's always going to hear any kind of thing behind her. She's going to jump. But you know what? It's like it's too late now. But now they want to sit there and do the knee-jerk reaction and then try to fix it. But I don't know how it is, other states and this and that, but I know how it is here, and I can speak on it. They're going to sit there and try to turn it around to where it's her fault. Yeah. I've seen it 100 times to where something bad happens to an officer. Oh, well, he did this. Just like you said, don't put the blame on the inmates. Put the blame on the officer. Oh, they didn't follow this procedure. They didn't follow this policy. This is why we have them in place. Well, guess what? You didn't give her the necessary tools she needed to follow that specific policy because you knew that building wasn't set up to accommodate what she needed to do.
You make a great point, too, because, when there's a major incident at a facility, so let's say an assault on staff, a death, whatever it is, there's always going to be that divide between administration and front line, because one is administration wants to make sure, okay, it wasn't a policy failure. And front line is going to be thinking, they want to make sure it's not the officer. So they're going to be like a quick defense when actually that's the point we have to be together. It's the craziest thing. When you have that major incident, everything wants us to communicate, but there's forces that hold us against each other. But the forces turn out to be really superficial in the long run, because the forces are based on the potential for a liability. Well, the thing is, at this point here, even if the person, let's say you have an officer and they did make a mistake, the point is if they made a mistake but they still were assaulted by an inmate, does the mistake supersede the fact that the person that assaulted them deserves criminal charges, deserves to be prosecuted? No, because the people are like, well, management should have protected them. Okay, but at this point, management's going to have to step up. Don't get me wrong. But before we fight amongst each other, because we know that's probably going to happen, how about we work together first, and get the person held responsible, and then we could work on the technicality flaws. Because here's the sad thing. If they see that we're divided, the lawyers get involved now. And the lawyers will see what we're arguing about, what the union's arguing with management, and that becomes their argument against us. It's crazy. They'll see us voicing a concern. Now we're divided, and the lawyers will come in and say, well, wait a second, because you guys haven't really settled on policy. Obviously, there's got to be a policy concern here. And then all of a sudden, people take their mind off the fact that, wait a second, we've been arguing now, let's say for years, about a policy concern. We totally forgot that he assaulted her. Now it's about everything else. So if I can make a recommendation here, when we have those moments of, extreme issues, whatever it is, the acts of aggression, death, violence, whatever it is, we should be doing our best to be working together, having that partnership, and then deal with whatever those other things are off to the side. But please, let's focus on holding the person responsible who commits to that violent act. What's your thoughts? Final thoughts, Greg?
Tony, I watch you get very passionate this evening. And one of the ways that you will watch me in a respectful way lose my shit on an administration when I go there to help them is when they use the words that Phil used. Well, that's the way we've always done it, and that's the way we're going to do it. You know who used those words? The folks before Columbus, and the people before we split the atom, and the people before we did a lot of things. Just because we've always done it that way doesn't mean we have to keep doing it that way. We have to learn and grow. I will not blame the officer that opened the door for those youth offenders. I will not blame Sergeant Callahan. I will not blame the officer at Cook County. I will not blame that officer. We want to have a time of mourning. We want to have a time of respectfulness. And then we're going to take this issue and we're going to learn from it. But facilities that continue to just stick to the old ways and don't want to change, well, it works just fine. No, it doesn't. We have to make changes. This is 2020. This isn't 1970. Phil, you said you started in the early 80s.
93.
We do things very differently now, and we should. We have different policies, different procedures, a different clientele. These aren't the same inmates. I mean, I only started in the early 2000s, but that was a different inmate than we deal with now. They've changed. We have to change. Things have to continue to update. So we take these unfortunate situations, learn from them, train on them, grow with them, while still respecting those who either were assaulted or have passed on, whatever the case is. But if you're afraid to grow and change, get out of administration.
Yeah, well said, Greg. I guess the key at the end of this discussion is, obviously noting of the assaults. I don't think the assault got the attention it should have. Noting the passion behind Phil when I saw this great video that he put together. Guys, if you get a chance, please check out the video. Go to his channel. Hey, Phil, what's the name of your channel again?
It's just under my name.
Okay, so Phillip Maginnis.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to actually put a link to his channel in our description. So if you guys go to the description, you can see the link. But it's great to see people that work, that work in the field to have a voice. And it's great to see that voice has no restriction. I saw that when you were passing your message. And I believe that's why people related to that message, because they saw the heart behind it. So well done. Just well done. I mean, obviously we could picture ourselves in those situations, and that's why we're passionate, but also that's our brother and sister that was assaulted. So again, just another great show. Thank you, guys. We'll probably have another show, if not today, tomorrow. I'm actually working on my story. I'm interviewing someone tomorrow for 15 minutes, and on Saturday, we're going to release all our stories. I just got William Young's story, so I'm going to check it out. I'm the only person that gets to see everybody's story. Yeah, that's how it is. Greg, you have to still get your story.
Yep,
Phil, if you want to be part of it, you have till Saturday.
I'm interviewing my guy on Thursday.
Are you?
Yes.
Don't tell me. Don't tell us what it is.
I won't tell you more than that, but since I still have this opportunity, folks, when you're watching this video, make sure you do subscribe and hit the bell for Phillip Maginnis, and also for Guardian RFID. We'd appreciate it, because there's lots of information out there that Phil's putting out there, that we're putting out there, that Tony's putting out there. the more opportunities you have to watch those videos, forget about the scrumptious and the dude perfects and the, yeah, that's fun to watch right now, but get some information too. And these 3 channels will all give you good, solid, relevant information for your, to help you. And it's kind of fun too. We do have some funny stuff to, along the way.
Yeah. Yesterday's episode was doing, slow growth, but it was those correctional scenarios. And if guys, if you think of any scenarios, bring a Bible, run through the panel. I just want to mention 2 things before we close. And then we'll be good. I want to mention the new format here, the stories. So again, if you guys are interested, it's not just for us, but if you have a story you want to tell, we're kind of treating correctional officers like news reporters, as long as you keep the story within 10 to 15 minutes. So if you're interviewing somebody, you can be that 15 minutes. If it's a vlog, keep it like it's 10. So what we'll do is Saturday, we're going to go live. And then I'm going to go, okay, Greg, what's the story? Greg's going to go ahead and give us a little brief description. Then we're going to watch his story, which will be 10 to 15 minutes. Then we'll do mine. We'll do whatever it is. So it's going to be great because you're going to see different stories. It's going to be different topics. Nobody really knows. As long as there's some hint of corrections in there, we're good with it. And Phil, if you want to be a part of it, you have a couple of days to get a story. If you want to interview a hero in your neighborhood, whatever it is, as long as you keep the interview within 10 to 15 minutes, you can come on Saturday and then we'll play it out live and then we'll just keep it out there. It's just to try something different. And I think it'll be fun. Maybe we'll do it twice a month. And then the other thing I want to do too is I've been watching T with Gary V. I kind of like Gary V. He's a motivational speaker and entrepreneur. And what he does is he, kind of has his subscribers come on. They could ask whatever questions they want. So I was hoping to do is if you guys have questions that you want to ask, I'll have a panel. Maybe we'll have a panel discussion once a week. And I'll bring you onto Zoom. And then I'll give you each guys, let's say 15 minutes. And we'll have a dialogue. We'll answer whatever questions you got. And then we'll bring the next person on. It gives us a chance to talk to our viewers, meet our viewers, but also gives you a chance to say a voice. At the very end, you could say, hey, go Giants, or whatever the hell you want to say at the end. But it gives you a chance to have a voice, and that's kind of what this is about. So, as always, hold on. I did this to Russ last time. I'll do it to Greg. Greg, sign us off.
Thanks for watching today, folks. We really appreciate all your support. If you like what you see, like, subscribe, engage, hit that bell, and make sure you continue to watch all of the great videos. It'll get you to the latest videos here on Tier Talk, and of course, Phil, Maginnis, and Guardian RFID. Thanks for watching. Get your team home safe. We'll see you next time.
Stay safe.